Reynolds, who has been busy all day. We hear Austin is the epicenter right now, Representative Reynolds. So for those who are not quite clear on what the George Floyd Act would do here in the state of Texas, explain that to us.
Absolutely, Isaiah, and I'm so happy to be on your show to talk about this. This House Bill 88, the George Floyd Act, is our #1 legislative priority this session from the Texas Legislative Black Caucus. And I'm the vice chair, and I'm proud that our own Houstonian is the author of the bill, Representative Sophronia Thompson. George Floyd, as your listeners know, is a native of Houston, 3rd Ward, CUNY Homes, Jack Yates. He's our own. We know what happened to him when in Minnesota, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, we saw the officer's knee on his neck. We saw him take his last breath where he literally said, I can't breathe, and called out for his mom. Well, the George Floyd bill is a combination of the George Floyds all over this state and all over this country that have been killed and have been the victim of police misconduct. This bill brings much needed criminal justice and policing reforms to Texas. This is a Texas bill. So here's what it does. This is not a bill to defund the police. So that's a false narrative. This bill does nothing of that sort. I testified before this bill today, and here's what it does. Simply, this bill brings much needed reforms. One of the main things that it does, it ends what we call qualified immunity, where officers can't be held civilly responsible for doing something that they should have done within the course and scope of their employment. So right now, if at present tense, if an officer goes out and knocks you upside the head and knocks your teeth out, you can't really sue that officer. But that is not fair because you may have damages and you need to be compensated. Officers should be held liable. If you come and punch me, guess what, Isaiah? I'm going to sue you. And I'm going to be able to go and get Tony Busby or whoever else I want to get, and I'm going to be able to collect on you. But that can't happen for officers. So this would end qualified immunity. One of the things that also would do is have a duty for an officer to intervene. We saw where George Floyd, when the officer had his knee on his neck, there were other officers that were around the officer chauffeuring. They didn't do anything.
And Representative Reynolds, that was one of the most enraging things in that video.
Correct.
People are yelling and screaming, saying he can't breathe. The other officers,
they're just looking.
Yeah, just looking or holding the public off.
And here's one of the critical pieces of this bill. If this bill passed today and an officer did that, they would be just as liable as the officer who had the knee on the neck, because they would have a duty, a responsibility to intervene just like they would in any other situation. So if they saw this, they would have had a duty to push the officer off, to stop him from continuing to inflict bodily harm against someone. So that would make them have an affirmative duty. It would end what we call excessive practices. For example, it would end chokeholds. They would no longer be able to do chokeholds. Chokeholds have been responsible for causing a lot of excessive damage to people, and this would end that. This would have a duty to de-escalate. So a lot of times it doesn't rise to the sense of bodily harm. A routine traffic stop doesn't have to end in death like Sandra Bland did. So this would basically, the officer would have a duty to de-escalate the situation. So it has a duty to end excessive force. They would have to corroborate testimony of undercover officers in narcotics cases, just like they do for informants. And so there's a lot of different components to this bill, but basically the crux of it is to put protections in place so that people have an opportunity to not be their rights be violated. This would basically put some teeth behind policing reforms to have them more accountable. Most officers are good, but this would help hold the rogue officers accountable for bad acts. And it would basically limit their opportunity to disenfranchise or to treat blacks or browns or any other minority different than they would any other person.
Now, one of the points you just made is most officers are good, and we all agree with that. So where are many of the law enforcement agencies